So one thing you may have noticed as you're playing around with this is every time we go to a new route, we're refreshing the whole view. So if I go to another user, it refreshes the view. Well, that's obviously not what we want because we're building a single page application and we don't want the whole view to refresh. That's actually because we have a typo or a bug in one of our previous videos. So go ahead and go to the search GitHub component. Right here, instead of being profile slash, we actually want it to be slash profile and then the username. So once we do that, then we should get something like this. I'm going to go home and I'll type in a new username. And there we go. But you'll notice here, if I type in a new username now, it doesn't refresh the whole view. So this data is still the same, even though we're going to a new route. Well, the reason for that is because we're receiving new props into our components, but we're not doing anything with those new props. So React gives us another handy little lifecycle method that we could hook into, which is called component will receive props. So what this does is whenever our profile component receives new props, this callback function is going to get invoked. And what's nice is whenever React Router changes routes, because our routing is going through props, this function will get invoked and then we'll have those new props. So let's go ahead and see this. So all I'm going to do is inside of component will receive props. Let's just console.log. The next props are with the next props. And what we should see here is if I refresh this and go to a new username, we get these new props, and under params, we have the username. So let's go ahead and change up our component a little bit. So what I'm going to do is let's go ahead and make an init function, because what's going to happen is we're going to call this data or this chunk of code when the component mounts, but also we want to set up a listener to the new user whenever we receive new props as well. So let's go ahead and I'm going to copy this code and put it into my init function. And then in component did mount, I'm going to call this .init. But now we don't want to query this .props.params.username, because what's going to happen is when this init function runs, if we call it in component will receive props, we're not giving it the new props. So it's going to say, so if I'm on my own profile, Tyler McGinnis, if we type in a new user, well, this .props.params.username is still going to be Tyler McGinnis. So what we want to do is let's go ahead and have this init function take in a username, and then we'll switch out all of these for that username. And then what we can do is whenever the component receives props, we're going to go ahead and pass this .init next props.params.username. And also when our component mounts, we're still just going to pass it this .props.params.username. Okay, so init is now taking in the username, whether it's from the params itself or when we receive new props, those next props coming in. So let's go ahead and see if this works. Everything looks good. Webpack is running. Hit refresh. Let's go to Spencer's profile. This .state.notes is already bound to a Firebase reference. Okay, so what we need to do is, so the reason this is being thrown is because in our component did mounts, we run a init, and that comes in here and binds to our notes endpoint, or to our notes property on our state. Well, Firebase isn't going to let us bind to multiple things, which makes sense. So what we're going to do is inside of our component receives props, before we call init again, let's just go ahead and call this .unbind notes. So now when we receive props, we're going to unbind what we were bound to in our component when it mounted, And then we're going to rebind to the new username. So let's see if this works now. Tyler McGinnis. There we go. Our data loads. And we can go to any username we want here.